Welcome back. The Congressional Budget Office estimates more than $1.8 trillion in debt this fiscal year, the highest since the COVID pandemic. That estimate up 11% from last year's $1.7 trillion gap, but slightly lower than the CBO's June estimate. Joining me now is Missouri Congressman Jason Smith. He is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be with you, Maria.
Your reaction to these debt numbers?
Well, it's a direct result of the Biden-Harris policies. When they took the oath of office, CBO projected that the deficit would be half of what it ends up being fiscal year 24. Half. And why is that? They went on a $10 trillion spending spree in their first 2 years where the Democrats controlled the White House, the House, and the Senate. And this is catching up to that spending.
So what do you want to say then to, like the Wall Street Journal last week said, well, when you look at Kamala Harris's spending plan versus Donald Trump's spending plans, Donald Trump adds to the deficit. How do you read these two plans, the economic plans and the impact on the deficit?
But Donald Trump's plan does not add $10 trillion over 10 years, which in fact, that's what Harris did just as the tie-breaking vote on the American Rescue Plan, which was a $2 trillion spending project that paid $400 billion to people to not even work. We saw the Inflation Reduction Act, which was roughly $1 trillion that rewarded their environmentalist buddies, wealthy billionaires. In fact, the green energy tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act, 90% of that money went to entities that had more than $1 billion in sales. They're clearly not the party of the working class. Their policies are the party for the billionaires, and it's really funny to hear how she wants to tax the billionaires, but she's been giving tax relief to the billionaires.
And of course, we've got interest rates, short-term interest rates that are on the move, making all of that debt that much more expensive to carry. What is your take on the economic plans in terms of the tax plans? I know President Trump wants to extend the tax cuts, but Kamala Harris keeps saying over and over again that she's going to make sure that the rich pay their fair share. Isn't it true that the highest earners already pay almost half of all taxes, income tax?
Yeah, it is true. And what's so ridiculous is for her statement to say that the rich should pay their fair share. Maria, if you took every single dollar of every billionaire in the United States, it could not even fund 9 months of our existing government. And she's wanting to spend trillions of dollars above that. It's just not even feasible. It's not doable. It's just a talking point that she throws out there. She is trying to just get her talking points correct this election cycle. Her policies are absolutely atrocious.
Well, and she doesn't really communicate what she's going to do, which is even scarier. Look, here we are 4 weeks away from Election Day. A new Gallup poll shows the economy is still the top issue for voters. Out of 22 listed topics, democracy and terrorism rounding out the top 3 concerns, 90% of registered voters say that the economy is extremely or very important in deciding their vote for president. That's the highest percentage since 2008 during the Great Depression. The Great Recession. It felt like a depression for some. Kamala Harris attempted to explain her economic agenda during an interview on 60 Minutes Monday. Not sure if you saw this. Watch.
You want to give tax breaks to first-time home buyers.
Yes.
And people starting small businesses.
Correct.
But it is estimated by the Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget that your economic plan would add $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. How are you going to pay for that?
My plan is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class, and you strengthen America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
But pardon me, Madam Vice President, the question was, how are you going to pay for it?
I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
Congressman, what about that? It seems like that's her answer to everything. Make sure, the highest earners and business pays up.
As the moderator said, we're dealing with the real world here. Look at the last 1,400 days of the Biden-Harris administration. She has said that she would not change anything differently. And what does that mean? every American has faced a 20.3% inflation tax just to put food on their table, clothes on their backs, and gasoline in their cars because of the Harris-Biden economic policies, where she was the tie-breaking vote that brought this incredible $10 trillion worth of spending. And what has she said repeatedly, Maria? On day one, she wants to repeal the Trump tax cuts. So what does that mean? That means a 35% corporate tax rate. That would be the fourth highest tax rate of any nation in the country, almost 10 points above that of communist China. These are the economic policies that would crush America globally.
Well, I mean, it's really disingenuous for her to talk about her efforts to rein in inflation when it's, in fact, her fault and Joe Biden's fault, spending $10 trillion in the last 4 years. Of course, it was too many dollars chasing too few goods, but she blames corporate America. She claims there's price gouging going on, which we have no evidence of, in terms of food, grocers with very small margins. But it also underlines the mismanagement that we've been talking about at FEMA. You know, FEMA is under fire for its funding shortage. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer now calling for FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell to testify next month about the federal government's response to these hurricanes, Hurricane Helene and possibly Hurricane Milton. Watch this.
We have a lot of questions for FEMA, and I don't think anyone in Congress in either party can answer specifically where they spend their money. I certainly plan on bringing the FEMA director in mid-November. We don't want to do anything to hinder the efforts that are ongoing now, but I think a lot of these questions hopefully will get answered in the middle of November. At the end of the day, I think we need to have a complete review of FEMA, just like we did with the Secret Service when the House Oversight Committee brought in Kimberly Cheadle.
So, Mr. Chairman, I got to get your take on what's going on at FEMA because, you know, the White House is pushing back, saying, no, we did not use FEMA money for illegal migrants. But we have the evidence because Karine Jean-Pierre walked us through it 2 years ago. Watch this.
FEMA regional administrators have been meeting with city officials on site to coordinate available federal support from FEMA and other federal agencies. Funding is also available through FEMA's emergency food and shelter program to eligible local governments and non-for-profit organizations upon request to support humanitarian relief for migrants. We'll continue to do what we can as a federal government to support these cities as we rebuild our asylum processing system after it was gutted by the Trump administration.
So I don't know what she's talking about in terms of being gutted by the Trump administration, Congressman, but obviously Kamala Harris and Joe Biden gutted the FEMA money run by Alejandro Mayorkas, who's got this wide open border. So the White House keeps pushing back. No, you're confusing it. This is two different funds. One FEMA fund is for food assistance, like you just heard. But so what if it's two different funds? At the end of the day, it's FEMA money. And they used FEMA money for illegal migrants, which is what one of your colleagues, Andrew Clyde, just told us. Here's what he said. Watch. Then I get your response. This worry that there, in fact, is intermingling with this money. I understand the Republicans are saying that these are two separate funds.
Two different pots of money or not is irrelevant. I think what the Biden-Harris administration has done is they have twisted the mission of FEMA, and now they're using FEMA money to support illegal aliens coming into this country. That should never be the mission of FEMA. You know,
I mean, Mr. Chairman, can you believe this? We are looking at Florida and North Carolina, people hanging on from trees to stay alive. They've lost everything because of these storm surges, and now they're worried that FEMA doesn't have any money to help them. Why? Because they used the money. Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas used the money for illegal migrants. Is this true?
You know, Maria, it's absolutely heartbreaking to see what's happened in Appalachia. But what is atrocious, it's not just about FEMA using their funds as a slush fund for the president and vice president's liberal priorities, such as, providing relief to illegals instead of Americans. What's so disturbing, Maria, is the complete lack of leadership that we are seeing out of the White House. Vice President Harris, President Biden, it's like they really don't care about the disaster that's happening in Appalachia. That is what's so disturbing. They should be boots on the ground more than just photo ops and trying to make it political talking points.
I mean, you as the chairman of House Ways and Means and as an elected official, can't you ensure that the taxpayer dollars are going where taxpayers expect and not a cleanup of a FEMA fund for illegal migrants who are actually disrupting life everywhere in this country for American citizens?
Maria, one of the most frustrating things as a member of Congress is when we appropriate the dollars for the intended use, we then see the abuses of the administration's spending in complete different ways than what was appropriated. That is what's disturbing, and that's why you try to have oversight over the administration, but this administration's been blocking us from day one.
Yeah, that's not right. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning.